Hello, my weird friends. I'm Jason White. This is Jason's Weird Reads, and today I'm going to be doing a book tag. I've seen this going around. It's the old school April book tag. Now, this is a tag that deals with nostalgia, and I am all about nostalgia. And that's the main reason why I wanted to do this tag. And if anyone has tagged me, I have not noticed it. So I am just going out on a limb here, and I'm doing this tag because I love talking about the things that I used to love when I was a kid. So here we go. Here are the questions. The first section here is Reading Rainbow. Question number 1. What book, author, or series got you into reading? Now, I've said this before. I did not start reading horror books. I started reading this weird little Vietnam book series that was done by a publishing company, called Golden Eagle, I believe. They did like the Mac Bolan books and stuff like that. And the book series I'm talking about is Vietnam Ground Zero. I remember I was at the hospital with my grandma had a heart attack. I was about 10 or 11 years old. And we were at the hospital for a long time, just sitting around and waiting, basically, for news. And so being a 10-year-old, 11-year-old kid, I was wandering the hospital, and I went into the gift shop and I saw this book. And for some reason, I had this weird fascination with the Vietnam War. And this fictional book about the Vietnam War seemed like it might be fun. And it took me a while, but I convinced my mom to buy it for me. And I read it while I was in the hospital and at home. And I fell in love. This book is written by an author named Eric Helm, but from my understanding, Eric Helm is actually a pseudonym for 2 writers, I believe. That's what it says, but when I looked deeper into it, I have learned, I think this might be true, but it might not be, that Eric Helm wasn't just 2 authors, but like a handful of authors, like 5 or 6, who would write the books. And you can, if I remember correctly, you can tell because sometimes the character's hair color would change and, just things like that. So it was, that's basically the book series that got me reading on my own. You see my cat there. So, question number 2, what author or book got you into your current favorite genre? And that obviously is horror. I would have to say that Swan Song by Robert R. Pacman was the gateway, because Swan Song isn't necessarily a horror book, but it does have some horror elements. It's more of a maybe science fiction fantasy. It's about, post-apocalyptic nuclear war story that I read when I was around 14 years old, and it absolutely blew my mind. It's sort of what cemented me in becoming a reader, because this was on a whole other level, this writing and this story, and I fell in love with it. So I went and got all the Robert R. Pacman books I could find, and of course that was horror, and I was instantly addicted. From there I went to Dean Koontz, I believe, and John Saul, and for some reason I waited until later in my teens to tackle Stephen King. I don't know why I waited so long, but I did. And then, so once I hit Stephen King, it was all over. There was no turning back. Next section here, mixtape. Question number 3, what was the first concert you ever went to? So this is interesting because I went to a couple, I'm Canadian. I live in Ontario, and there's a couple of Canadian bands that were pretty big here. I don't know if anyone else in the world has heard these guys, but the first concert I went to was Platinum Blonde, and they had some hits in the 80s. And I went with my brother, who was visiting at the time, and they came to a local town and played a show. And I remember they also had, I think it was at the end of the show, they had a desk out in the front lobby, and they were signing posters. And one of the band members gave me his pen, and to me that pen was like touched by a god or something. So I put it up on the wall with thumbtacks, and every time I touched it, I felt this wave of godlyhood rush through me. It was a strange time for me, I guess. Question number 4. What band or artist do you love but never got to see live? This one hurts, honestly. This one hurts a lot because there's 2 here I want to mention. One of them I'll never be able to regain. I had the chance. Lollapalooza was touring. This is like 1995 or 96, and Alice in Chains was headlining with Lane Staley. It might have been 94, now I think about it, because it was soon after this tour that Lane Staley kind of didn't want to tour anymore. Mostly because of his drug habit. So I had this opportunity that I had a friend who was working like behind the scenes, like helping people park. Basically, you put on the vest and you point to where people have to go to park. And it was like all morning. You had to be there at like 6 a.m. And so my friend phoned us up. He's like, we need some help. If you come and do this, you'll get into the concert for free. And I remember thinking, that's not a bad idea. I could go see Alice in Chains. They were my favorite band at the time. And I turned it down because I think it was because I didn't want to go and get up and be at the place where they were doing this at 6 a.m. That was a terrible idea. My reasoning was that, I can catch them next time. There was no next time. I missed out for not wanting to get up early in the morning. Being a kid, man, let me tell you. Anyways, there's another one that's more recent. It's like 2016, I think. 2 of my favorite bands were touring together, and they came to Toronto. I could have went, and they were Windhand and Conan. And I don't think I'll ever see that pair again. That sonic boom, that wall of noise, I will never be able to catch again unless they tour again and come to Toronto again, which it's hard to say if that'll ever be in the chips. All right, so with that regret out of the way, we're going to the next question, number 4. Sorry, I already did that one. Next section here. I always feel like somebody's watching me. Question number 5. What was your favorite cartoon while growing up? I remember watching a lot of He-Man. Those He-Man cartoons from the 80s, I think it was. I had He-Man everything. I had He-Man Castle, He-Man figurines, He-Man everything. Like I said, I just absolutely loved He-Man. And I also loved G.I. Joe. That first round of cartoons was on at that time in the 80s. I'm aging myself here terribly. All right. Question number 6. Name a TV show or movie that is tied to a good memory. I remember watching shows like Remington Steele and Dukes of Hazzard when I was a kid. Like, I'm talking like when I was 6. I loved those shows back then. There's a movie, though, there's 2 movies here that are connected to a bad memory, though. And I find these funny. Actually, I find it kind of fond now, but at the time it was horrifying. I was about the same age, 5 or 6, and my mom went out on a date, and she rented me Blade Runner. I was way too young to be watching Blade Runner at the age of 6. And I ended up turning the movie off at the scene where the female android kicks the living crap out of Harrison Ford. It freaked the hell out of me. And when I was a little bit younger than that, I maybe should have started with this story because this one's funnier. Me and my mom and my grandma, we went to go visit one of my grandma's friends. And we did this like once a week. It was just something that we did. And this one time when we were visiting her, let me preface this by saying every time we went to visit her, they would put a movie on to entertain me while they all sat at the kitchen table and chatted. And so while I was stuffed away in the bedroom, this time they put on a movie that they saw on the TV guide. They probably had absolutely no idea what it was or what it was about. It was called Alien. We all know this movie, Alien, with Sigourney Weaver. And they put it on around the time when the android in that movie flips out and attacks Sigourney Weaver, or Ripley, with a rolled up newspaper, and is like pretty much trying to kill her with it. And then one of the crew members come up from behind and knocks his head off with a fire extinguisher, and he's like bouncing around the walls with his head flapping on his back. And let me tell you, that terrified the living hell out of me. I started crying, and they didn't know what was going on, so they come rushing in, and then they see what's on the TV, and they're like, oh my god, what? This wasn't no little cute little alien film that they maybe thought it was. It was the scary one. So that was you know, looking back on that now, I was like, man, that's awesome. But back then I was horrified. Question number 7. Name a movie from childhood that you still love today. You know, this one's a tough one because I don't think there is any, honestly. I can't think of one. I wasn't really big into movies when I was a kid, honestly. Movies were harder to watch back then. It's not really a kid's movie that I'm thinking of here. It's Friday the 13th Part 4. It's the movie that got me into horror. I remember I used to be afraid of everything when I was a kid, horror movies especially. And when I was around 9 or 10, it was my birthday, and I asked my mom if she could rent me Friday the 13th Part 4, because probably my friends at school were talking about it when I don't know how I heard about it, honestly, but it was either from people at school or it was just there. Maybe it was just the one that we picked, but I wanted to face my fear, and Friday the 13th Part 4 was it. And the funny thing is it didn't scare me half as much as I thought it was going to. Even the ending. I think the ending, if you've seen this movie, you know what I'm talking about. You know, the die part. That disturbed me a little bit, I guess, but it didn't terrify me, not like Alien did. But those are really two hugely different movies. But that's what turned me into a horror movie fan. So I guess I'll go with that. It's not a kid's movie necessarily, but it's a movie from my childhood, and I still love that film because it was my first horror movie that I loved. All right, next question. Which is question number 8. Name your first TV or movie crush. Now this, I was absolutely head over heels over Alyssa Milano in Who's the Boss. I think she and I are roughly around the same age, and so she was easy for me to get my crush on with her, and she was a serious crush. In fact, whenever I did have friends at school, we all kind of loved Alyssa Milano. She was someone we talked about. All right, next section here. Gotta catch 'em all. Question number 9. What was a toy you were obsessed with or collected as a kid? Well, I already talked a little bit. I had like all the G.I. Joe stuff and the He-Man stuff. But my first toy that I remember specifically was I had a stuffed animal of a lamb. And as a child I called it Lambs. And that stuffed animal went with me everywhere. I remember I used to hold it up over my head while going to sleep if I had trouble getting to sleep as a kid, which I sometimes did, and I would bounce his nose off my nose. And I don't know why I did that, but it was very soothing, and it would help me go to sleep. And I did that. I have a lot of memories of doing that at night. All right, question number 10. Oh, sorry, we're in another section here. Pacman fever. Question number 10. Name a board game or a video game you associate with your childhood. I have 2 here, both one for each category. For board game, I don't know if it's just because this was like the 80s and 90s, but Monopoly monopolized everything. Everyone wanted to play Monopoly. And so Monopoly was popular with everyone. And I don't know how many times it would be like, hey, you want to play some Monopoly? We would always play Monopoly. So that was definitely like a board game that I definitely associate with my childhood. If I go to play Monopoly now, it's like becoming a kid again. And the video game I associate with my childhood is very familiar to everyone as well, and that's Mario Brothers. That was my first Nintendo game. I loved that game. That was breakthrough stuff back then, because from Atari to that, it was like, man, this is gold right here. All right, next section here. She's got the look. Question number 11. Name a clothing or trend that was popular when you were a kid. I don't really have too much of this because I never really followed trends all that much, but I did get obsessed with Doc Marten boots when I was in my teens because of the whole grunge scene, and I fought like hell to get a pair of Doc Marten boots, and it never really happened. I did have a pair, but I didn't like how the crown of the toe, it almost looked like a work boot instead of an actual Doc Marten. But they seemed like they were real Doc Martens, but I don't know if they were. They just didn't look right, in my opinion. So I was kind of disappointed with that. So that's one thing for sure, was Doc Marten boots and, the flannel look of the 90s with the grunge stuff. I was definitely heavily into that. And final section and question here. I want candy. Question number 12. Name a childhood snack or candy you wish were still made. Now I have a fun, this isn't a snack or a candy necessarily, it's a pop or a soda. When I was a kid, we used to go down to the corner store once a week. We did this, I don't know for how long, I don't think it was too long, maybe a year or two. We'd go down once a week, maybe once a month, and you get these red baskets that would hold pop bottles. And the pop that I'm talking about is the Pop Shop, I think it's called. The picture's right there, you might recognize it, but you get these little trays that would hold like 12 pops or something like that. And so you bring back the empties each week, and then you fill it up with new pop, and then you bring that tray home with the pop, and you just fill up the fridge and enjoy. Back then we didn't drink pop as much as we do these days. Like, you always see people drinking pop, and it's probably very unhealthy. And these pops, they were filled with sugar, and it's probably one reason why I liked it so much. It's so sweet, so tasty. And so that's a fond memory I have of my childhood, and snacking, I guess, drinking pop. All right, so that's my answers for this really cool book tag. All the details as to who created this are in the show notes. Thank you for watching. Keep being keep being weird, my friends, and keep being creative, and I'll catch you guys in the next bookish video.